I exposed the truth about our church finances, and it cost me everything. My family, my community, my church home, everything I'd built for 43 years. But I'd do it again. Because some things matter more than comfort. Some things matter more than keeping the peace. My name is Deborah Marshall, and this is the story of how I lost everything by choosing truth over silence. It started on a Sunday morning in October 2022. Cornerstone Baptist Church was celebrating its 75th anniversary. The sanctuary was packed with over 500 people, current members, former members who'd moved away, community leaders. The mayor was even there. We decorated the building beautifully with burgundy and gold banners, the church's colors, white roses on every pew, a professional photographer capturing every moment. I sat in the 5th row on the left side, the same spot my grandmother had sat for 50 years before she passed. The same spot my mother sat for 30 years before she joined Grandma in glory. The same spot I'd occupied for 43 years, ever since I was born. Cornerstone wasn't just my church. It was my legacy, my heritage, my family's greatest contribution to our community. My grandmother, Mother Sarah Marshall, was one of the 7 founding members of Cornerstone Baptist Church back in 1947. She and 6 other families had scraped together every dollar they could find to buy the land and build the original building. A small wood frame structure that could hold about 80 people if everyone squeezed in tight. Grandma Sarah used to tell me stories about those early years, how they'd meet for Bible study in each other's homes during the week, how the men would work construction jobs during the day and then come build the church at night and on weekends, how the women would cook meals to feed the workers and sell plates to raise money for materials, how they'd pray and cry and believe God for what seemed impossible. She said they'd named it Cornerstone because Jesus was their foundation, Christ the solid rock. Everything else was sinking sand. That church was built on faith and sacrifice and the absolute conviction that God was going to do something powerful in that place. And He did. Over 75 years, Cornerstone had grown from 80 people in a wood frame building to over 500 members in a beautiful brick structure with stained glass windows, a fellowship hall, a commercial kitchen, and classrooms for Sunday school and Bible study. We had a youth ministry, a food pantry that served 200 families a month, a scholarship program that had sent 37 young people to college, a job training program, an after-school tutoring program. We weren't just a church, we were the heartbeat of our community, a place of refuge and hope and transformation. My grandmother had given everything to build Cornerstone. My mother had served faithfully in every ministry you could name, and I had followed in their footsteps, believing that this was where God had planted me to bloom. That 75th anniversary service was magnificent. The choir sang, "We've come this far by faith," and there wasn't a dry eye in the building. Elder Johnson, who was 92 years old and one of the last surviving founding members, gave a testimony about the early days that had people shouting and praising God. Pastor Marcus Williams preached a powerful sermon about legacy and faithfulness and finishing well. He'd been our pastor for 12 years and had led the church through tremendous growth. Under his leadership, we'd paid off the building mortgage, renovated the sanctuary, and expanded our community programs. People loved Pastor Williams. He was charismatic, educated, prophetic. He had a doctorate in theology and could preach a sermon that would have you on your feet 1 minute and on your knees the next. After the service, we had a huge celebration in the fellowship hall, catered food, a professional DJ, a slideshow of the church's history that had people laughing and crying as they saw photos of loved ones who'd gone on to glory. I was standing near the dessert table, talking to Sister Evelyn Parker, who'd been a member for 60 years, when Pastor Williams approached us. "Sister Deborah," he said with that warm smile of his, "can I speak with you for a moment?" "Of course, Pastor." We stepped away to a quieter corner of the fellowship hall. "Sister Deborah, I've been praying about this, and I believe the Lord has been speaking to me about you taking on a new role in the church." I was surprised. I was already heavily involved. I sang in the choir, taught Sunday school, coordinated the food pantry, and served on the hospitality committee. "What role did you have in mind, Pastor?" Our church treasurer, Deacon Miller, is stepping down. His health isn't what it used to be, and he feels it's time to pass the baton. The board has been praying about who should take over, and your name kept coming up. You have a background in accounting, you've been faithful to this church your whole life, and you have the integrity and wisdom we need for this position. I felt honored, truly honored. The church treasurer was a significant position of trust and responsibility. It meant overseeing all the church's finances, writing checks, managing accounts, preparing financial reports for the board, and ensuring everything was handled with excellence and integrity. Pastor, I'm humbled, but that's a big responsibility. I'd need to pray about it. Of course, take your time. But I will say this. Your grandmother would be so proud. She always said the Marshall women were the backbone of this church. And I believe you continuing in leadership would honor her legacy. He knew exactly what to say, invoking my grandmother's name and legacy, appealing to my sense of duty and family honor. Let me pray about it this week, and I'll give you an answer next Sunday. That's all I ask. God bless you, Sister Deborah. I did pray about it every day that week, and everything in my spirit said yes. This was an opportunity to serve at a deeper level, to honor my grandmother's legacy, to ensure that the resources God had entrusted to Cornerstone were managed with integrity and used to further His kingdom. The following Sunday, I told Pastor Williams I would accept the position. He announced it during service, and the congregation responded with applause and affirmation. Deacon Miller came forward and prayed over me, asking God to give me wisdom and discernment in handling the church's finances. The transition was scheduled to take place over the next month. Deacon Miller would train me on all the systems, introduce me to the bank, show me the accounting software, and walk me through a typical month of financial management. I was excited, nervous, but excited. I saw it as a sacred trust, an opportunity to serve God and my church family with excellence. I had no idea I was about to discover something that would change my life forever. The first few weeks of training with Deacon Miller went smoothly. He showed me how to access the church's bank accounts online. We had 3 accounts: a general operating account where tithes and offerings were deposited, a building fund account for major repairs and improvements, and a benevolence fund for helping members in crisis and supporting community programs. He showed me the accounting software where we tracked income and expenses. He explained the budget process and how financial reports were prepared for the monthly board meetings. Everything seemed straightforward and well organized. Deacon Miller was meticulous. He had file folders for everything: receipts, invoices, bank statements, contracts. He kept paper copies of everything, even though most of it was also digital. He said it was important to have backup records in case anything ever got questioned. Sister Deborah, he told me during one of our training sessions, the most important thing about this position is integrity. People trust us with their tithes and offerings. Those are holy funds, sacred resources that people give to God. We have an obligation before God and this congregation to handle every dollar with absolute honesty and transparency. I agreed completely. That's how I'd been raised. That's what my grandmother had modeled. Financial integrity in the church was non-negotiable. By mid-November, I was officially taking over. Deacon Miller was still available if I had questions, but I was now responsible for day-to-day financial management. The first month went fine. I processed the weekly offerings, paid the bills, utilities, insurance, payroll for our 2 part-time staff members, vendors for the food pantry. Everything balanced perfectly. December was busier because of Christmas programs and year-end giving. We always saw an increase in donations in December as people made their final charitable contributions for the tax year. That December, we brought in almost $40,000 more than usual. I remember feeling so blessed, so grateful that our congregation was generous and committed. With that extra money, we'd be able to fully fund the scholarship program for the next year and possibly expand the food pantry hours. But then, in early January, I started noticing something odd. I was reconciling the December bank statements, making sure everything in our accounting software matched what the bank showed. It's basic bookkeeping. You compare your records to the bank's records to make sure there are no errors or discrepancies. As I was going through the general operating account statement, I noticed a check that seemed strange. This check had been written from our general operating account, where all the weekly tithes and offerings were deposited. Check number 4487 for $2,500 made out to MW Consulting Services. I didn't recognize the vendor name. I looked through the files Deacon Miller had left me. No contract or invoice for MW Consulting Services. I searched the accounting software. No previous payments to that vendor. Nothing in the budget for consulting services. $2,500 to a vendor I couldn't identify with no supporting documentation. I told myself it was probably fine. Maybe it was a legitimate expense that just hadn't been properly documented. Maybe it was a one-time payment for something Pastor Williams had authorized. I made a note to ask about it at the next board meeting, but then I found another one. Check number 4502 for $3,000 to Williams and Associates. Again, no contract, no invoice, no previous payment history, nothing in the budget. I started going through previous month's statements more carefully, looking at every check, every electronic transfer, and I started finding more. September, $2,200 to MW Consulting. August, $2,800 to M. Williams Professional Services. July, $3,000 to Executive Coaching Solutions. June, $3,500 to MW Strategic Planning. I went back further. May, April, March. Different vendor names, but always with the initials MW or some variation of Williams in the name. Always between $20,000 and $4,500, always with no supporting documentation that I could find. My heart started racing. My hands were shaking as I added up the numbers. Over the past year, there had been at least $35,000 in checks to vendors I couldn't verify. Vendors that had no contracts, no invoices, no budget allocation. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe these were legitimate expenses that Deacon Miller had just failed to document properly. Maybe Pastor Williams had authorized these payments for special projects and the paperwork had gotten lost somehow. But something in my gut said otherwise. That sick feeling you get when you know something is wrong, but you don't want to believe it. I decided I needed to talk to Deacon Miller first, before I said anything to anyone else. Give him a chance to explain. Maybe there was something I was missing. I called him that evening. Deacon Miller, I'm sorry to bother you, but I have a question about some payments I'm seeing in the bank statements. There was a pause. Then, what kind of payments? Checks to consulting companies, MW Consulting, Williams and Associates, several others. I can't find any supporting documentation, and they're not in the budget. Do you know anything about these? Another pause. Longer this time. Sister Deborah, those are probably related to special projects Pastor Williams was working on. He handles some things directly that don't always go through the normal channels. But there's no documentation, no contracts or invoices. How am I supposed to account for these properly? Look, his voice had an edge to it now. Pastor knows what he's doing. If he authorized those payments, they're legitimate. You don't need to worry about it. But Deacon Miller, you told me yourself that we need to document everything, that we need transparency and accountability. How can I prepare accurate financial reports for the board if I don't have proper documentation? Sister Deborah. His tone was firm now, almost warning. Some things are above your pay grade. Pastor handles certain matters at his discretion, and the board trusts his judgment. I suggest you do the same. Don't go looking for problems where there aren't any. He hung up before I could respond. I sat there holding the phone, my heart pounding. That conversation had not gone the way I expected. Deacon Miller, who had been so emphatic about integrity and documentation, was now telling me not to ask questions about tens of thousands of dollars in unexplained payments. I barely slept that night. I kept thinking about those checks, about Deacon Miller's reaction, about the fact that all these suspicious vendor names included the initials MW or the name Williams. Pastor Marcus Williams, MW. Was it possible? Was our pastor, the man we trusted, the man who preached about integrity and stewardship, was he embezzling money from the church? I didn't want to believe it. I fought against the thought with everything in me. This was Pastor Williams, the man who had grown our church, the man who prayed with families in crisis, the man who'd buried my mother and held my hand through my grief. But the evidence was right there in black and white. Thousands of dollars going to vendors that didn't exist, and Deacon Miller telling me not to ask questions. I prayed that night like I hadn't prayed in years. God, show me the truth. If this is something innocent, reveal it. If this is something wrong, give me wisdom to know what to do. Because I don't want to believe this. I don't want this to be real. Over the next few weeks, I kept doing my job, processing offerings, paying bills. But I also kept investigating, quietly, carefully. I looked up the vendor names online. MW Consulting Services, Williams & Associates, Executive Coaching Solutions, MW Strategic Planning. None of them had websites. None of them showed up in business registries. They were ghost companies, shell businesses that existed only on paper. I checked to see where the checks had been cashed. All of them had been deposited into accounts at a bank different from where the church banked. I couldn't see whose accounts they were without subpoena power, but the pattern was clear. Someone was creating fake vendor names, writing checks from the church account, and depositing them into personal accounts. And based on the initials and names, that someone was almost certainly Pastor Marcus Williams. I found myself pulling away emotionally. Sunday services became harder. I'd sit in my grandmother's spot, listening to Pastor Williams preach about faithfulness and stewardship, and I'd feel sick, angry, betrayed. How could he do this? How could he steal from God's people? From the church my grandmother had helped build with her own hands? I started paying closer attention to other things. Pastor Williams drove a brand new luxury SUV. His wife wore expensive designer clothes. They took multiple vacations every year. Their children attended private schools. I'd always assumed his lifestyle was funded by speaking engagements and book royalties. He was well known in denominational circles. People requested him to preach at conferences and revival services. He'd written 2 books on leadership and ministry. But now I wondered, how much of his lifestyle was actually being funded by money he was stealing from Cornerstone? Let me pause here for a moment to recap what's happened so far, because I know this is a lot to take in. I'm Deborah Marshall, and I've been a member of Cornerstone Baptist Church my entire life. My grandmother was one of the founding members. The church is celebrating 75 years, and I've just been appointed as the new treasurer. But as I'm learning the position, I'm discovering unexplained checks for tens of thousands of dollars going to fake companies with names that match our pastor's initials. Deacon Miller, the former treasurer, has told me not to ask questions. And I'm beginning to suspect that Pastor Williams is embezzling from the church. Now let me tell you what happened next. By February, I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just keep silent about this, but I also didn't know who to trust. If Deacon Miller knew and was covering for Pastor Williams, who else knew? Were other board members involved? Was this a conspiracy? Or was Deacon Miller just scared to confront the pastor? I decided I needed to document everything carefully before saying anything to anyone. I made copies of all the suspicious checks. I created a spreadsheet showing every questionable payment over the past 18 months. I calculated the total amount, $47,000. That's how much had been stolen from Cornerstone Baptist Church while everyone trusted Pastor Williams with their tithes and offerings. $47,000 that should have gone to help struggling families, to send kids to college, to feed the hungry, to expand God's kingdom. Instead, it had gone into Pastor Williams's pocket to fund his luxury lifestyle. I was furious and heartbroken and terrified about what would happen when I exposed this. In early March, I made an appointment to meet with Elder Thompson, the chairman of the deacon board. He was 78 years old and had been a member of Cornerstone for over 50 years. He'd known my grandmother. He was one of the most respected men in the church. If anyone would know what to do, it was Elder Thompson. We met at a coffee shop away from the church. I didn't want anyone to see us and start gossiping about what we were discussing. I laid out everything I'd found: the fake vendors, the unexplained checks, the lack of documentation, the pattern of initials and names pointing to Pastor Williams. The timeline showing this had been going on for at least 18 months, probably longer. Elder Thompson listened quietly, his face getting graver and graver as I talked. When I finished, he sat back in his chair and let out a long breath. "Sister Deborah, these are serious allegations. Very serious." "I know, Elder Thompson. That's why I brought them to you. Because I don't know what to do. But I can't just ignore this." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Do you know what you're risking by bringing this forward?" "What do you mean?" "Pastor Williams is beloved by this congregation. He's brought tremendous growth and blessing to Cornerstone. If you accuse him of this and you're wrong, or if the church decides they don't want to believe it, you'll be the one who suffers. They'll say you're divisive, a troublemaker, someone trying to tear down the man of God. You could lose everything." "But Elder Thompson, I'm not wrong. The evidence is right here. Look at these bank statements. Look at these checks. This is real." "I believe you," he said gently. "I believe what you're showing me is real. But that doesn't mean everyone else will believe it, or want to believe it. So what are you saying? That I should just keep quiet? Let him keep stealing from God's people?" "I'm saying you need to count the cost before you move forward. Because this is going to get ugly. Really ugly. And you're going to be in the middle of it." I felt tears burning in my eyes. My grandmother built this church with her bare hands. My mother gave her life to serving this congregation. I can't dishonor their legacy by staying silent while someone steals from God's house. I have to do what's right, even if it costs me everything. Elder Thompson reached across the table and took my hand. "Then we'll do this together. But we have to do it the right way, by the book, following proper procedures. We'll need to call an emergency board meeting, present the evidence, let the board decide how to proceed. It needs to be handled with integrity and transparency, just like the finances should have been handled in the first place." "When should we do this?" "I'll contact the other board members this week. We'll schedule a meeting for next Saturday. Confidential. Board members only. And you. You'll present your findings, and then we'll take it from there." I nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and dread. Relief that Elder Thompson believed me and was willing to help. Dread about what was coming. The next week felt like the longest week of my life. I went to church on Sunday and sat in my grandmother's spot, knowing that everything was about to change. Knowing that after the board meeting on Saturday, nothing would ever be the same. Pastor Williams preached about Nehemiah rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem. About facing opposition from enemies who wanted to stop God's work. About staying focused on the mission despite attacks and discouragement. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here he was, preaching about integrity and faithfulness, while stealing from the very people he was called to serve. Saturday came. The board meeting was scheduled for 10 in the morning at the church. Elder Thompson had told the other board members it was an emergency financial matter that needed to be addressed urgently. There were 12 people on the board, the 5 deacons, including Deacon Miller, the 4 elders, including Elder Thompson, the church clerk, the Sunday school superintendent, and Pastor Williams. We gathered in the church conference room. Everyone looked confused and concerned. Emergency board meetings were rare. People knew something significant must be happening. Elder Thompson called the meeting to order. "Thank you all for coming on short notice. We have a serious matter to address today. Sister Deborah Marshall, our church treasurer, has discovered some financial irregularities that require the board's immediate attention. Sister Deborah, would you please present your findings?" My hands were shaking as I stood up. I passed out copies of the documentation I'd prepared. The spreadsheet showing all the questionable payments, copies of the checks, copies of bank statements with the suspicious transactions highlighted. "Over the past 18 months, I began, my voice steadier than I felt. There have been at least $47,000 in payments to vendors that I cannot verify. These vendors have no contracts with the church, no invoices, no supporting documentation. When I searched for these companies online, they don't exist. They have no websites, no business registrations, nothing. They appear to be shell companies created solely to funnel money out of the church account." I watched the faces around the table as people looked at the documentation. Shock, confusion, disbelief. Furthermore, I continued, all of these fake vendor names include either the initials MAW or some variation of the name Williams. MW Consulting, Williams and Associates, MW Strategic Planning. The pattern is clear and consistent. Pastor Williams had gone very still. His face was unreadable. When I asked Deacon Miller about these payments, he told me they were related to special projects and that I shouldn't ask questions. He specifically said some things were above my pay grade and that Pastor handles certain matters at his discretion. Deacon Miller's face flushed red. That's not exactly what I said. I was trying to explain that. Is there documentation for these payments? Elder Thompson asked him directly. Contracts, invoices, anything that would justify $47,000 going to these vendors? Deacon Miller looked at Pastor Williams, then back at the board. Pastor authorized those payments. I assumed he had proper documentation. All eyes turned to Pastor Williams. He leaned forward, his hands folded on the table. When he spoke, his voice was calm, too calm. These payments were for consulting services I retained to help develop strategic plans for the church's growth. Ministry coaching, leadership development, strategic planning, all legitimate expenses for the betterment of this ministry. Then where are the contracts? I asked. Where are the invoices? Where is any documentation showing what services were provided and by whom? Some consultants prefer to work on a more informal basis, he said smoothly. Not everything requires a formal contract. $47,000 requires documentation, Elder Davis, one of the other elders, said firmly. Pastor, with all due respect, you can't just write checks for tens of thousands of dollars with no paper trail. That's not how church finances work. That's not how any legitimate organization's finances work. Are you questioning my integrity? Pastor Williams' voice had an edge now. We're questioning the lack of documentation, Elder Thompson said calmly. That's not an attack on you personally, Pastor. That's us doing our fiduciary duty to protect the church's resources and ensure accountability. I see. Pastor Williams stood up. So my 12 years of faithful service mean nothing. The fact that this church has tripled in size under my leadership means nothing. The hundreds of souls saved, the families restored, the community impact we've had, all of that means nothing. But Sister Deborah here, who's been treasurer for all of 3 months, comes in with accusations and suspicions, and suddenly I'm the criminal. Pastor, no one said criminal. Elder Thompson tried to interject. That's exactly what you're implying. His voice was rising now. You want documentation? Fine. I'll provide documentation, but I won't sit here and be accused of stealing from God's house. I won't be disrespected by people I've poured my life into serving. He grabbed his Bible and his phone and walked toward the door. Pastor, please sit down, Elder Thompson said. We need to work through this. No. What you need to do is decide whether you trust me or whether you're going to believe this witch hunt. I'll be in my office. Let me know what you decide. He walked out, slamming the door behind him. The room erupted. Several board members started talking at once. Deacon Miller was defending Pastor Williams. Deacon Richards was demanding answers. The Sunday school superintendent was crying. Elder Thompson banged his gavel on the table. Order. We need order. Let's take a breath and discuss this calmly. For the next 2 hours, the board went back and forth. Some members, like Deacon Miller and Deacon Washington, were adamant that Pastor Williams would never steal from the church. They insisted there must be a reasonable explanation, and we should trust him. Others, like Elder Davis and Elder Monroe, said the lack of documentation was inexcusable regardless of whether fraud was involved. Even if the payments were legitimate, they should have been properly documented and approved by the board. I sat quietly through most of it, answering questions when asked, but otherwise letting the board process what I'd presented. Finally, Elder Thompson called for a vote on next steps. He proposed that the board hire an independent forensic accountant to conduct a full audit of the church finances for the past 3 years. The auditor would examine all transactions, verify all vendors, and determine whether any funds had been misappropriated. The vote was 7-5 in favor of the audit. Pastor Williams was called back into the meeting and informed of the decision. His face was like stone. "You're making a mistake," he said quietly. "A terrible mistake, and you're going to regret it." He looked directly at me when he said it. The threat was clear. The audit was scheduled to begin in 2 weeks. A reputable accounting firm was hired. They would have full access to all bank accounts, all financial records, all documentation. In the meantime, the board voted to temporarily suspend Pastor Williams's ability to sign checks. All payments would require 2 signatures from board members until the audit was complete. Pastor Williams was furious. He preached a sermon the next Sunday about false accusations and attacks from the enemy. He didn't name me specifically, but everyone knew who he was talking about. He talked about how Satan attacks men of God, how jealous people try to tear down what God is building, how we need to stand with God's anointed leaders even when they're under attack. After service, people avoided me. Some glared. A few came up and told me they were praying for me, but their tone made it clear they thought I was the problem, not Pastor Williams. My phone started ringing. Church members calling to tell me I was wrong, that I was being used by the devil, that I needed to repent and ask Pastor Williams for forgiveness. Someone started a petition calling for my removal as treasurer. Within a week, over 200 members had signed it. I received hate mail, anonymous letters calling me terrible names, accusing me of trying to destroy the church. One letter said I was a disgrace to my grandmother's memory. That one hurt the most. My grandmother had built Cornerstone on integrity and faith. I was trying to protect her legacy, and people were saying I was disgracing it. The worst part was the isolation. People I'd known my entire life suddenly wouldn't speak to me, wouldn't sit near me in church, wouldn't return my calls. I felt like I was being erased. Like 43 years of faithful service meant nothing because I dared to ask questions about unexplained money. The audit took 10 weeks. 10 weeks of walking through the church doors every Sunday and feeling the hostility. 10 weeks of Pastor Williams preaching sermons that felt like personal attacks. 10 weeks of wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. But I held on to what I knew was true. The money was missing. The documentation didn't exist. Someone had to speak up, even if it cost me everything. Let me pause again to recap where we are in the story. After discovering $47,000 in unexplained payments, I brought my findings to Elder Thompson and then to the church board in early March. Pastor Williams reacted with anger and denial. The board voted to hire an independent auditor. The congregation turned against me, with over 200 members signing a petition for my removal within a week. The 10-week audit process was brutal, facing hostility every Sunday, receiving hate mail, and watching friendships dissolve. The audit was completed in mid-May, and now I'm about to learn what the forensic accountant discovered. The forensic accountant presented his findings to the board on a Saturday morning in mid-May. I was there, along with all the board members and Pastor Williams. The accountant was a middle-aged black man named Robert Carter, who'd been recommended by our denomination's regional office. He had 30 years of experience in forensic accounting and had worked on numerous church fraud cases. His report was thorough and devastating. Over the past 3 years, he began, a total of $93,000 has been diverted from Cornerstone Baptist Church through fraudulent vendor payments. The vendors in question are shell companies registered to Marcus Williams. The checks were deposited into personal bank accounts controlled by Marcus Williams. There is no evidence that any legitimate services were provided in exchange for these payments. The room was completely silent. Furthermore, Mr. Carter continued, there are indications that this pattern may extend back further than 3 years, but older bank records would need to be subpoenaed to confirm. Based on the pattern I observed, I estimate the total amount diverted could be as high as $150,000 to $200,000 over a 5 to 7 year period. Someone gasped. I think it was the Sunday school superintendent. In addition to the fraudulent vendor payments, there are numerous other financial irregularities. Credit card expenses charged to the church that appear to be personal in nature. Travel expenses for trips that were not church-related. Honorariums paid to Pastor Williams for speaking engagements where the church, not the pastor, was supposed to receive the honorarium. Mr. Carter handed out copies of his full report. 43 pages of detailed findings, bank statements, canceled checks, credit card statements, everything documented and verified. My professional opinion, he concluded, is that Pastor Marcus Williams has been systematically embezzling funds from Cornerstone Baptist Church for at least 3 years, and likely longer. This constitutes fraud, theft, and breach of fiduciary duty. I recommend you immediately report this to law enforcement and consult with an attorney regarding civil litigation to recover the stolen funds. Pastor Williams sat through the entire presentation with no expression on his face. When Mr. Carter finished, Pastor stood up. "This is a witch hunt," he said. His voice was eerily calm. "An attack orchestrated by people who want me removed so they can take control of this church. I will not dignify these false accusations with a response. My attorney will be in touch." He walked out. This time, the board didn't try to stop him. Elder Thompson looked around the table. "We need to vote on next steps." The vote was unanimous this time. All 12 board members voted to immediately suspend Pastor Williams from all duties pending a full investigation. They voted to report the findings to law enforcement. They voted to consult with an attorney about civil litigation. They also voted to keep me as treasurer and to publicly apologize for the hostility I'd faced. But that last part didn't matter much. The damage had already been done. The board made an announcement the next Sunday. They read a statement explaining that a financial audit had revealed serious irregularities and that Pastor Williams had been suspended pending investigation. They asked the congregation to pray for wisdom and healing. The reaction was split. About half the congregation was shocked and heartbroken. They'd trusted Pastor Williams completely, and the betrayal devastated them. The other half didn't believe it. They insisted it was a conspiracy, a setup. They believed Pastor Williams was innocent and being persecuted. That second group turned their anger on me. Even though the audit had confirmed everything I'd found, even though an independent professional had verified the theft, they blamed me for exposing it. "You should have kept quiet," one woman told me after service. "Even if it was true, you should have protected the church's reputation instead of airing our dirty laundry. This church will never recover from what you've done," a man I'd known for 30 years said to me in the parking lot. "My grandmother helped build Cornerstone too, and she's probably rolling in her grave watching you destroy it." The district attorney filed criminal charges against Pastor Williams for fraud and embezzlement. During the months between his arrest and trial, while he was free on bail, Pastor Williams started holding services at a rented facility across town. He called it New Beginnings Ministry and preached about persecution and being falsely accused. About 150 members from Cornerstone followed him there, believing he was innocent and standing by their pastor. The case went to trial that fall. I had to testify. Had to sit on the witness stand and explain how I'd discovered the theft, what I'd found, and how I'd reported it. Pastor Williams' defense attorney tried to paint me as a disgruntled member who wanted to take over the church. He implied I'd fabricated the evidence because I was jealous of Pastor Williams' success. But the evidence was too strong. The bank records, the shell companies, the deposited checks, all of it pointing directly to Pastor Williams. He was found guilty on 8 counts of fraud and embezzlement, sentenced to 5 years in prison, though he'd likely serve less with good behavior. He was also ordered to pay restitution of $93,000 plus court costs. When he was convicted and sentenced, the New Beginnings Ministry congregation mostly dissolved. Some came back to Cornerstone. Others scattered to different churches. A few stayed loyal and continued the ministry with guest preachers while Pastor Williams was in prison. We never got the money back. He'd already spent it. The cars, the vacations, the private school tuition, the designer clothes. All of it purchased with money stolen from people who'd trusted him to be a good steward of their sacrificial giving. As for me, even with the conviction, I remained a pariah to many. Some people still blamed me, said I should have handled it privately, should have gone to Pastor Williams first instead of the board, should have protected him instead of exposing him. By the end of that year, I'd lost more than half my friendships. People I'd known my entire life wouldn't speak to me. Families I'd celebrated with, cried with, prayed with, they wanted nothing to do with me. I lost my church home. Yes, I was still technically a member of Cornerstone. But it didn't feel like home anymore. Too much pain, too much division. Too many people who looked at me with anger or disappointment or pity. I lost my sense of community. For 43 years, Cornerstone had been the center of my social world. Now I felt like an outsider in the place my grandmother had helped build. I lost my peace. I'd wake up in the middle of the night with anxiety attacks, replaying everything that had happened and wondering if I could have done something differently. But here's what I didn't lose. I didn't lose my integrity. I didn't lose my relationship with God. I didn't lose the truth, because at the end of the day, I'd done what was right. I'd protected the church's resources. I'd honored my grandmother's legacy of integrity and faithfulness. I'd chosen truth over comfort. Was it worth it? That's a question I've wrestled with many times. Some days, I'm honestly not sure. The cost was so high, so incredibly high. But then I think about what would have happened if I'd stayed silent. Pastor Williams would have continued stealing. More money would have been diverted from ministry to fund his lifestyle. More people would have been deceived. The theft might have grown to the point where it threatened the church's financial stability. And I think about the young people in our congregation who were watching. They saw what happened. They saw someone stand up for truth, even when it cost her everything. They learned that integrity matters more than popularity, that doing right matters more than keeping the peace. One young woman, Sister Monica, came to me about 6 months after the trial ended. She'd been quiet through the whole ordeal, and I wasn't sure where she stood. "Sister Deborah," she said, "I want to thank you." I was surprised. Thank me? For what? For showing me what real faith looks like. I grew up thinking faith was about blindly following leaders and never asking questions. But you showed me that real faith means standing for truth even when everyone's against you. You showed me that protecting the church means holding leaders accountable, not covering up their sins. You changed how I understand what it means to be a Christian woman with a backbone. I cried when she said that, because it reminded me why I'd done what I'd done. Not for recognition, not for vindication, but because some things matter more than comfort. I eventually left Cornerstone, not because I was forced out, but because I needed to heal. I needed to find a place where I could worship without feeling the weight of everything that had happened. I found a smaller church about 20 minutes away, a humble congregation of about 150 people. They knew my story, but they welcomed me without judgment. They let me just be Sister Deborah, not the woman who exposed the pastor. I still drive by Cornerstone sometimes. The building still stands. The congregation is smaller now, but they're rebuilding. They have a new pastor, a humble man who's focused on healing and restoration. Elder Thompson told me recently that they've implemented new financial policies. Multiple signatures required on all checks. Monthly financial reports posted publicly. Independent audits every year. They're determined that what happened under Pastor Williams will never happen again. And maybe that's part of the legacy too. Maybe my grandmother's legacy isn't just about building a church building. Maybe it's about building a church culture that values truth and integrity more than charisma and growth. I think about Ephesians 5:11, which says, "Have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them." For a long time, I struggled with that verse. Because exposing darkness cost me so much. It would have been easier to stay silent, to look the other way, to protect my comfort and my community. But God doesn't call us to comfort. He calls us to faithfulness. And sometimes faithfulness requires courage. The courage to speak truth, even when everyone wants you to be quiet. The courage to stand alone if necessary. The courage to lose everything except your integrity. I won't pretend it doesn't still hurt. There are days when I miss my old church family, when I miss the sense of belonging I had at Cornerstone, when I wonder what my life would be like if I'd just kept silent. But then I remember that silent complicity would have made me part of the problem, that choosing peace over truth would have made me guilty too. That protecting a corrupt leader would have been its own kind of betrayal. God sees everything. He saw what Pastor Williams was doing. He saw the people who knew and stayed silent. He saw Deacon Miller's willingness to cover for wrong. And he saw my struggle to decide whether to expose it or ignore it. I believe God allowed me to be in that position for a reason. He needed someone with enough integrity to speak up. Someone who loved the church enough to fight for it. Someone who valued truth more than approval. It cost me everything, but I'd do it again. Because some things are worth more than comfort. Some things are worth more than community. Some things are worth more than belonging. Truth is one of those things. Integrity is one of those things. Faithfulness to God is one of those things. If you're watching this and you're facing a situation where you know something is wrong, but you're afraid to speak up, I want to tell you something. Count the cost. Because it will cost you. People will turn against you. You'll be called a troublemaker, a gossip, someone who's trying to tear down the church. But if you stay silent, it will cost you something else. Your integrity, your peace, your relationship with God. Because how can you stand before Him knowing you saw wrong and said nothing? Choose truth, even if it costs you everything. Even if people reject you. Even if you lose your church home. Even if you have to start over. Because God honors those who honor Him. He sees your faithfulness even when no one else does. He knows your heart even when everyone else misunderstands your motives. And one day, when you stand before Him, you'll be able to say, I chose truth. I chose integrity. I chose faithfulness, even when it cost me everything. That's worth more than any church position, more than any community approval, more than any earthly comfort. Hit that like button if this story spoke to your spirit. If you've ever had to choose between truth and comfort. If you've ever paid a price for doing what was right. Drop a comment and tell me your experience. Have you ever had to expose wrong in your church? How did you handle it? What did it cost you? What did you learn? Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And subscribe to Sister Circle Stories for more real conversations about faith, truth, and integrity in the Black church. We're not here to pretend everything is perfect. We're here to tell the truth about the real struggles women face when they choose to stand for what's right. God bless you. Stay faithful, stay courageous. And remember that when you lose everything for the sake of truth, you still have the one thing that matters most, your integrity before God. Nothing can take that away from you. Nothing. Amen.